Hello everybody, this is Jim Rose with NorCal Slot Car Scene. This past week we held our first race at Motown Raceway for our new GT3 class. The GT3 class consists of cars from NSR, Racer Sideways, Black Arrow, and others. When it came time to choose a car to race, I already had an NSR McLaren, so I decided to keep that and add a new car to my stable. The new car being a Racer Sideways 4GT LM. I ordered the 4GT in the Wins livery because I think it's kind of unique and stands out on the track. In addition to the car, I ordered the stiffer red chassis, which is usually preferable on the high bite track at Motown. I also ordered the flexible rubber wing, which is an option from Racer Sideways, as well as the slot invasion guide. The GT3 rules we use at Motown are somewhat similar to the rules that they use at Electric Dreams. That being, that is a spec motor. So whatever brand of car you're running, you do have to run the NSR 21.4 motor in an angle winder configuration. I also changed the stock spur gear to a 26 tooth that goes along with the stock 11 tooth pinion that comes from Racer Sideways. The 11:26 gear ratio very closely matches the stock 13:31 gear ratio that comes standard on an NSR car. Now that I had all the parts together, it was time to disassemble the car and reassemble it with all the new parts. When I disassembled the car, I did notice that Racer Sideways has included channels in the chassis to route the lead wire from the motor to the guide, which is really a nice feature. Using these channels makes for a perfect installation of the lead wire. You have a very nice loop in the front for a self-centering guide, and there's even an extra channel next to the motor that makes sure that the lead wires don't interfere with the interior of the car. Even if you're not installing a different motor, make sure you use 2 screws to mount the motor to the motor pod. I even use a little bit of silicone adhesive on the other end of the motor pod to make sure that the motor is securely in place. Another step we've taken to stiffen up the motor pod assembly is we've gone to an axle tube in the back. You can buy axle tubes from Slotting Plus as a one-piece unit, or in the case of this car, because I didn't have one the right size, I actually made my own out of 1/8 inch aluminum tubing. It's also a good idea whether you're using the axle tube from Slotting Plus or the homemade system that I have to glue the bushings in place in the motor pod. Now it's on to the wheels and tires. In the front, I used the stock plastic wheels that came with the 4GT kit. I glued the tires to the wheels and then trued them to the smallest diameter that I could. In the rear, our rules are open as far as wheels and tires go. So we're using the 13mm NSR F1 wheels. Now granted they don't look as good, but they do work very well for this class. The wheels I chose were NSR 5015 10mm wide F1 wheels and Super Grip rear tires. The 10mm wide wheels allow us to narrow the tires from the 13mm width that the rubber is down to 10mm on the wheel. Here are the 3 tire choices that we have using this wheel. You can see the standard 13mm wide on the left. The middle is the same wheel but narrowed from the outside in, so it's 11.5mm wide. And the one on the right is narrowed on both the inside and the outside, and it's only 10mm wide, and it works the best at the Motown track. Now it was time to test the car on the track, and I was able to go to Motown a couple of days before the race to try everything out. In stock configuration, the motor pod is attached to the car with a single center screw and 2 side screws. I added the 2 rear screws for a 5-point mount system. This worked pretty well, but I decided to try a 6-point mount using the 2 outside mounts in the front along with the 2 outside mounts on the side and 2 on the back. This seemed to work a little bit better, and that's what I decided to stick with for the race. Another thing I wanted to test at Motown was to stiffen the chassis even stiffer than stock. The Racer Sideways chassis come with a flex channel down the left and right of the chassis, but it also has 4 mounting points for bolts and nuts that allow you to stiffen the chassis even more. At first, I tried just the 2 rear stiffening holes, and the car felt better. After that, I decided to try all 4 stiffening holes, and the car was even better yet. The stiffer I got the car on this spray glue track, the better it got. The final thing I did was to start to add some tungsten weight to balance the car. I ended up with about 2.5 grams on each side of the chassis and about 2 grams in the front. And now the car was working extremely well and was running about 1/10 of a second faster than my NSR McLaren. I'm sure you're wondering how the car actually ran in the race. Well, it ran really good. I was battling for second place when 2 heats before the end, the lead wire came off and the car came to a stop. So that was the end of my race. When we looked at the results afterwards, I did have the fastest race lap. And another Racer Sideways car, a McLaren driven by Ian Douglas, won the race. Does this mean you'll have to have a Racer Sideways car to be competitive in the GT3 class at Motown Raceway? No, I don't think so. The NSRs were just as competitive. The one thing it does add to this class is a different manufacturer, as well as quite a few new body styles that NSR doesn't offer, like the Lamborghini, the Lexus, and even a Bentley. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this look into the GT3 class at Motown, as well as my Ford GT. This is Jim Rose with NorCal Slot Car Scene, and we'll see you at the next race.